And for this week's Think Tank Central, we're focusing on Pompeo's swing through the region and efforts to stand up an Arab NATO as the U.S. forces begin to stand down in Syria. Joining me from Washington is Ambassador Gerald Firestine, Senior Vice President of the Middle East Institute, and Theodore Kurasik, Senior Advisor to Gulf State Analytics. Jerry, let's start with you. So given the mixed messages coming out of Washington, how successful was Pompeo in allaying regional concerns about the Syrian exit?
Thanks, Barbara. Fundamentally, I have said that both Pompeo and John Bolton were on missions impossible when they went out to the region because our friends and partners in the region are going to be looking at our actions, and they'll speak more loudly than words. Whatever Mike Pompeo said, either in public in his Cairo address or in his private meetings with regional leaders, he could not have overcome the reality of Donald Trump's tweets and the actions that those tweets are engendering. So we've seen the beginning of the drawdown of Syrian forces. Mike Pompeo can say whatever he wants to say about this doesn't mean a change in the U.S. mission, but of course it does, and nobody in the region is going to believe him on that. As far as Iran is concerned, again, if you take away the rhetoric, if you take away all of the talk, and the one single action of the JCPOA withdrawal, there is nothing that this administration has done that actually constricts Iranian behavior.
Now, on that disturbing note, let's move it over to Ted. And Ted, the GCC unity was a top agenda item for Pompeo, and the Secretary talked about how this MISA, this Middle East Strategic Alliance, the Arab NATO, if you will, was the cornerstone for new U.S. policy in the region. So, is it a dead in the woods? It's a non-starter if Qatar cannot be welcomed back into the fold?
I think we need to understand here a very important point is that besides the fact that an Arab NATO is an idea that's been pushed by the United States for a number of years, there is, of course, the idea that Abu Dhabi itself is trying to push for this Arab NATO or MESA. So this is a two-directional attempt to try to create a new regional architecture, if you will. Pompeo's visit to the region, of course, ran into a brick wall with the Qatar crisis, and now there's going to have to be some kind of working around of this issue, and apparently to be headed up and next month in Poland. So we're going to have to, this is not a cutoff date, but a continuing process that will take time in the region, given the differences between various powers. And
for our viewers, we should note that this Arab NATO will include the GCC states and Egypt and Jordan, and we'll move it back to Jerry. How does all this effort for GCC unity square with the fact that Anthony Zinni, the retired CENTCOM commander, lifted his hands up in despair and said the parties do not want reconciliation?
Well, I think that's absolutely true. And of course, General Zinni was asked to take on this job by Secretary Mattis and Secretary Tillerson, and I think that Secretary Mattis's resignation might have had something to do with Tony Zinni's decision. But beyond that, I think absolutely he tried very hard, and in fairness, the administration made repeated offers, both during the Tillerson era and the Pompeo era, to try to help mediate, to support Kuwaiti mediation, but really without any sign on either side that the parties were ready to move forward to any kind of a negotiation, any kind of a compromise resolution that would allow the GCC as an entity to move forward.
And one follow-up, Jerry. The Secretary Pompeo said that we're likely to see the fruits and the manifestation of GCC unity in the days, weeks, and months ahead. He didn't talk about years. Empty talk?
Well, probably optimistic talk, and again, we have not seen yet any indication that the parties are prepared to negotiate on this. We had a GCC summit in December. There was some hope that perhaps that would be an opening for the parties to come together and sit down at the table. That didn't happen. The repeated efforts by the administration to bring the leaders here to the U.S. to negotiate hasn't happened. Kuwaiti efforts haven't succeeded. So hard to see why we would be optimistic at this point.
Ted, so let's focus a bit on Qatar. The U.S. And Doha have a $26 billion foreign military sales program. They just signed an MOU to expand the Al Udeid base, the forward operating base over there. They're working together with the Pentagon to enhance joint special operations, create an amphibious expeditionary force. So in the context of all the headaches caused by the Khashoggi murder and the humanitarian disaster that has been resulting from the Saudi and Emirati-led war in Yemen, could it be that Qatar will emerge as the most prized U.S. ally in the Gulf?
It's an excellent question, and I think time will tell. The important point here is that the United States and Qatar have signed major agreements together in terms of countering terrorism, but also making sure that America has access to Al Udeid and the KAYAK there.
Right.
And this is important because this means that Qatar stands out, in particular for U.S. foreign policy, as an island, if you will, within the rest of the Arabian Peninsula. What is important to point out here is that the U.S. is focusing on Qatar, but it's also focusing on its other Gulf allies. And this is in an attempt to try to bring some kind of balance to U.S. relationships with GCC countries as they're involved in the Qatar dispute.